Abdul-Samad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my brothers and sisters in the gallery, I recognize you as being the game changers because you have made us all listen, and we thank you for that. To the Speaker, to the Governor, to my colleagues, especially Rod Smith, I want to thank you for also bringing it to another level of us to listen to. But as many of you know, that for many years, you are right. I've always said we've had to listen. But also, if we don't know from where we have come, this historical piece of legislation for Iowa will not carry a legacy. If you don't know why you're voting for this bill, then it won't carry the legacy and have the substance that it needs to have. What makes this historical is that we're righting a historical wrong. We are going to address a wrong that has happened for over 400 years. That's what we are taking steps to do. And when I say that, because in our beloved country, where did this start? It started with the people that were enslaved in this country, whose history was taken, names were taken, religion was taken, everything about them as being a human being was taken. So we didn't address the fact that we enslaved human beings, and we didn't even put it in history books so our children would know what had happened. Your children, you as children, me as a child, as babies, we didn't learn it. We didn't understand what would happen to individuals that when you put in the Constitution of the United States that they were only 3/5 of a human being, what that effect that would have on individuals. Not only me as a black individual or the African Americans that are sitting here, but you as a human being. Because a lot of times that gave us some unconditional conditioning that taught us to accept racism as the norm. And how did that manifest itself? It manifested itself by Emmett Till, who was accused of whistling at a white woman who proved later he didn't do it, but he was hung. He was beaten. He died. To Malcolm X, who talked about we needed justice by any means necessary. What happened? He was talking. There was never a violent act with Malcolm nor the Nation of Islam at one time. Not one. He was shot to death. To Dr. Martin Luther King, who walked across the Pettus Bridge, who met violence every move that he made. Every time they talked about justice, every time they talked about voting rights, every time they talked about the problems with education, when they talked about the differences between white and blacks and how we needed to come together, he was shot to death. The streets lit up. People hit the streets almost in every state, and we didn't even have internet back then. There was no census, so Facebook and anything, but it was the pain and the hurt that was felt across this country because of the injustice that we did not step up to do, even though Iowa had a history of stepping up and doing what is right. Even though Iowa had a history of making sure that the first individual that was decided that could not be property was here in Iowa. Desegregating schools were here in Iowa. Having black soldiers trained was here in Iowa. Having the first women officers train was here in Iowa. We can step up. We have stepped up, but we refused for decades to step up again. And we were given time and time signs to step up. What were some of the signs that we were given? Trayvon Martin, who wanted to go to a store, was shot to death after he was told by a man was told by the police department to stay in his car and they would handle it, but he felt that this was his right and he was going to use stand your own ground to shoot this young man, and he did. And all this young man wanted to do was go to the store. We get signs because we have Michael Gardner, who was on the corner, who died of the chokehold, which this bill is addressing, because we know what happens when you give a chokehold. This is our history. We had Tamara Rice, a 12-year-old who decided to play cops and robbers in a park. And an officer drove up because they got a call about an individual in the park who had actually been let go from another police force but was rehired at the force that was there. That's why this bill is history, but understand the history. Breonna Taylor, who was at home. And then George Floyd. I say it that way because I'm glad we're doing the bill, but am I happy? No, I'm not happy. I'm glad we're working together because we need to. I appreciate the Speaker. I appreciate the President of the Senate. I appreciate the Governor. I appreciate my colleagues in here, both Republican and Democrat. But I'm sad because I stood in a line and watched young people with tears coming down their face because they were looking at us, and I saw the same tears that came down of my face when I was standing there protesting, and we were trying to become the game changers, and no one listened to us. So I saw their tears. I saw the pain. I heard the hurt. But that's what it took for us to move. But now that we have moved, let us keep moving. Let us not turn around. The Speaker, the President of the Senate, the Governor, Representative Ruth Ann Gaines, Representative Thede, our leadership here, Todd, said, no, we got to keep on going. This is the first step to get to the end of the tunnel. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And we must be able to run this marathon together. And if any of us drop out at this marathon and we quit listening to these young people, we quit listening to one another, we quit learning from one another, then we lose as a state. We have a chance to make history in the state of Iowa and send this message across this country that no longer are we sick and tired, like Family Lou Hamer said, but we're no longer going to put up to it, because no longer is Dr. King saying, I have a dream, it's just a nightmare. We are going to bring it to a reality, and we're going to bring it to fruition, because we are Iowa, and we are Iowans, and we're going to make it happen with all of us together. We refuse to be defeated. We refuse to let people talk about we can't come together. You see a bipartisan bill going to hit the floor that knows it's only the first step to what we have to do. And I'm saying to you today, my beloved brothers and sisters, and I mean all of you, not only are you part of history, you are rectifying history. And that is something that you can tell your babies, your grandchildren, so they can tell this story from now on, what we did in Iowa. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.